President's closest allies in the Congress, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. You heard a lot there from Congressman Nadler. He says the president obstructed justice. He sees abuses of power in the granting of the security clearance to Jared Kushner. He sees violations of the Emoluments Clause. Your response?
I think Congressman Nadler decided to impeach the president the day the president won the election.
He says he's not there yet.
Yeah, well, listen to exactly what he said. He talks about impeachment before he even became chairman, and then he says, you got to persuade people to get there. There's nothing that the president did wrong. And what was most...
Nothing?
Well, in this process to be impeached, show me where the president did anything to be impeached. The other thing you have to find is, listen to what Nadler said. Nadler is setting the framework now that the Democrats are not to believe the Mueller report. They're now saying we have to do our own investigation. After you had hundreds of interviews, millions of dollars spent in the Senate and the House, and they found no collusion. Even if you listen to the Cohen's own hearing last week, what did he say? He never went to Prague, which is the basis for Mueller.
Whatever he comes back with, you'll accept that?
I want to see Mueller's report, yes. I'm not setting a framework right now that I'm not going to support it. They're setting a whole new course because there is no collusion, so they want to build something else. They want to persuade to go some other place. Listen, Nadler says he wants his impeachment. Listen to, he said he had proof ahead of time. You have Schiff, who said he had evidence long before the investigation happened. He's never produced that. And now listen what we find out about Schiff in the Cohen hearing. He talked to Cohen. He met with Glenn Simpson, we found out, even when their own committee said they had problems with the truth in his own hearing. Schiff actually tried to stop us from finding out who paid for the dossier, the Democrats. Schiff has now met Schiff's own standard of why Devin had to recuse himself. Adam Schiff needs to recuse himself for any new investigation.
Devin, you mentioned Devin Nunes. He says the entire Mueller report underlying evidence should be made public. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Let's talk about some of the evidence. You said you didn't see any evidence of any impeachable offenses. Let's talk about some of the evidence. Congressman Nadler said that, for example, the implications of President Trump in the campaign finance violations may be an impeachable offense. I want to put up the check that Michael Cohen showed at the hearing on Wednesday, $35,000 check signed by President Trump in the Oval Office. Now, that check is part of a campaign finance felony that federal prosecutors believe was directed by President Trump. Doesn't that concern you?
Listen, you know what concerns me? If you hire an attorney. If I hire an attorney to make sure I carry out the law, the attorney has a responsibility to tell me what's right and what's wrong in the process. I watched, this is if it's a finance campaign, those are fines. Those aren't impeachable in the process. Listen to what else they did. This is what's so concerning to me. Last week, we just hit 2.6 in GDP. Did we talk about that? The president's sitting in Vietnam talking with North Korea. The history has always been in the past with America that politics ends at the water's edge. No, they're having this hearing right then. They're discrediting America, and they dislike this president so much they won't give him an opportunity to try to denuclearize North Korea, that they'd have a hearing on that day. George, you know this as well as I do. Nobody else in any history would do this to a president when they're overseas. To try to discredit him just because they dislike him and put their dislike ahead of the country. Look, they're picking circus over a solution.
Well, that's your concern. But you say you're not concerned about the check. If there is no problem with these checks, if there is no problems with the reimbursement, then why did the president lie about it for so long?
You know, you could ask that question to the president, but this is a personal issue, and why would most people not go to the American public about this? You've seen politicians do this exact same thing in the past. So to me, they're trying to find a case for a problem that doesn't exist.
You also saw the congressman say it was an abuse of power for the president to grant the security clearance to Jared Kushner over the objections of the CIA, his White House counsel, perhaps his White House chief of staff. Now, as I said, no one disputes that the President Trump has the right to grant his son-in-law that security clearance, but was it the right thing to do?
The president, as you just said, the president has the legal authority to do it. The president has a right to pick his national security team around him. Who's going to work with him? And you know what? This week, Gallup just came out with a new poll looking at how does America think they are viewed around the world. We are now at the highest level we've been, 58% since 2003. The president is doing a very good job. The president has the legal authority to do it. The president has to trust the people around him. You've been in those offices. You know what the president has to have, the trust of the individuals. If you're going to work on Middle East peace, if you're going to work around the world, you want to have trust in those individuals,
absolutely
and
true,
the president
and I've been in those offices. One thing I've never seen before is a case like this. You had the CIA concerned about Jared Kushner. You've had reports that foreign nations believed he was vulnerable to being compromised. Does Congress, does the American public have a right to know what the CIA was concerned about with Jared Kushner?
Look, I think the president has the right to pick, just as you said, whoever he wants.
I know, but that's
around.
not what I asked. I said, does the Congress have a right to know the concerns about Jared Kushner and why the president overruled the CIA's concerns?
Well, I think the president looked at the concerns. The president says those weren't concerns to him, so he could have them around. If we went through every person that had this authority before, I'll guarantee you other people's had concerns raised with them. The president gets to make that decision. They give you the pluses and the minuses, whatever the concerns are. The president made the choice, and he's doing a good job at it.
You talked about North Korea. The president also took some flack for saying he takes Kim Jong-un at his word for not knowing anything about Otto Warmbier, for not taking responsibility for it. Do you take Kim Jong-un at his word?
Look, I think the president clarified that. Look, North Korea murdered Otto.
Right, but Kim.
I think Kim had all authority to do that. I mean, I think Kim knew what happened, which was wrong. That's why when we passed sanctions, we named it after Otto Warmbier. That's why the president kept those sanctions in place. The sanctions the president did not lift on North Korea are named after Otto, and I think the president clarified that.
Actually, he said North Korea, not Kim.
Well, I think Kim knew.
Finally, let's talk about the national emergency a little bit. You pretty much held the line in the House. This week, only 13 Republicans voted against the president, but it looks like to be a little bit dicier in the Senate. Here's what Republican Senator Lamar Alexander has said about the president's declaration.
There has never been an instance where a president of the United States has asked for funding, Congress has refused it, and the president has then used the National Emergency Act to justify spending the money anyway.
Aren't you concerned that this could come back and bite Republicans if a Democrat gets the White House again?
Look, the president has authority to do this. In 1976, we actually kind of shrunk the power, and he still has the power to go forward. 60 times it's been used. But think about what has happened in the past. The drugs that are coming across, the number of people who have died, the human trafficking. In 2005, because the federal government didn't act along the border, 2 governors did take their own emergency. Janet Napolitano, who became DHS secretary. She took it along the border in Arizona because she said what was happening with the smuggling and others. You had Bill Richardson in New Mexico do the exact same thing. There is a national emergency along the border. The president has the authority to do it. Congress acted, and this goes beyond. The president will be upheld in this action as well. The president made this promise.
So you're not concerned that the president's going to be overtaken there? Finally,
I think he'll veto and he'll be fine.
So you do think the Senate will pass it?
If the Senate does, it'll get vetoed.
won't
So
get
I don't think it's why they move forward with trying to override it, to me.
When Michael Cohen finished up his testimony this week, he warned Republicans that they're doing now what he did for years in defending the president, and they're going to pay the same consequences. Does that concern you at all?
You know what concerns me? You had this hearing when the president was in Vietnam negotiating to denuclearize North Korea. This man is going to jail for lying. This man sat before us and simply said, yeah, he'll take a book deal. He'll take a movie deal. No one believes this man and what he's been able to say in the past and what he's be able to say in the future. Why are we giving him so much attention? So what concerns to me, we're doing nothing what he did. He led his life trying to sell influence, trying to sell lies and others. This is what the Democrats are trying to build.
So no concerns with what he laid out about the president?
No, you know what concerns me is the meeting he had, or the meeting he said he talked with Schiff. How many times did Schiff meet with him? Did staff meet with him? What'd they say? What did Schiff talk about with Glenn Simpson, who Fusion GPS, who Nellie Orr worked for? How about Adam Schiff, that he's met this new threshold, that he said Devin Nunes had to recuse himself because it was the standard that Schiff set. Now he's met this. Shouldn't he recuse himself going forward with anything new that we do?
We'll ask him next time he's on. Congressman McCarthy, thanks very much.